Rain hammered against the windows like accusations that wouldn't stop. Savannah pressed her back against her bedroom door, listening to the desperate voices downstairs. Her father's pleas mixing with her mother's quiet sobs. She already knew what they were going to tell her. The eviction notice had been pinned to their door for 3 weeks. Debt collectors called every hour. When her parents finally summoned her to the living room, they couldn't meet her eyes. Her father sat hunched over a whiskey glass like a man carrying the weight of the world. Her mother twisted her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit that had grown worse with each passing month. "There's no other way," her father said, voice barely above a whisper. "Damien Blackwood has agreed to clear the debt. All of it." Savannah felt the floor shift beneath her feet. In exchange for what? Her mother's sob caught in her throat. "Marriage. A legal contract. He wants a wife." The words hung in the air like poison. "You're selling me." It came out flat, emotionless, because the alternative was screaming until her throat bled. "It's not like that," her father said, finally looking at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. "The contract is clear. You'll be provided for, protected. The Blackwood name means something. You'll want for nothing, except choice." The silence that followed was deafening. Savannah walked to the window and stared out at the rain-soaked street. She thought about running, disappearing into the night and never looking back. But where would she go? No money, no connections, no family beyond the 2 broken people sitting behind her. And if she ran, the debt would remain. Her parents would lose everything anyway. "When?" she asked without turning around. "Tomorrow," her mother whispered. "The car comes at 10, 24 hours. That's all the time she had left to be herself." She turned back to face her parents, and for the first time in months she saw them clearly. They weren't monsters, just people who had run out of options. It didn't make it right, but it made it understandable. "I'll need time to pack." Her father nodded, unable to speak. Her mother reached for her, but Savannah stepped back. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. If her mother touched her now, if she showed any kindness, Savannah would break apart completely. That night, she sat on her bed surrounded by the remnants of her life. 25 years reduced to a single suitcase, each item a small goodbye. Her favorite sweater from college, the dress she'd worn to her first job interview, the book of poetry her grandmother had given her before she died. At the bottom of the suitcase, she placed a small velvet box containing a silver locket. Inside was a photo of her as a child, laughing at something just outside the frame. She'd been so happy then, so sure the world was good and that love was real. She closed the locket and fastened it around her neck. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Damien Blackwood, but tonight she was still Savannah Blake. The morning arrived gray and cold. She dressed in a simple black dress, her grandmother's locket hidden beneath the collar. She braided her hair back severely, armor disguised as grooming. The black SUV arrived precisely at 10. The driver was polite but distant, holding the door open without meeting her eyes. As they pulled away, Savannah watched her parents standing in the doorway, their faces etched with guilt and grief. She didn't wave goodbye. The drive took 3 hours through winding California hills, vineyards and olive groves, expensive cars and gated communities. This was a different world from the one she'd grown up in, where money moved like water and power was measured in acres and influence. When they reached the iron gates of the Blackwood estate, Savannah felt her breath catch. The house beyond was massive, all stone and glass and sharp angles. It looked like a fortress, beautiful but forbidding. A man waited at the top of the stone steps. Even from a distance, she could see he was tall, dressed in an expensive black suit that fit like armor. Dark hair perfectly styled, posture rigid with control. This was Damien Blackwood, the man who had bought her like a commodity. The car stopped. The driver opened her door. Savannah stepped onto the gravel driveway, her heels clicking against stone. The wind caught her hair like a warning. Damien watched her approach with eyes like winter storms. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't offer any gesture of welcome. Simply looked at her as if she were a problem to be managed. When she reached the steps, he spoke for the first time. "Miss Blake." His voice was deep, cultured, completely without warmth. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. He studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable. "Younger than I expected. You're exactly as cold as I was warned." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. It It was gone too quickly to be sure. Follow me. Savannah picked up her suitcase and followed him through massive front doors. The interior was even more imposing. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. Beautiful in the way museums were beautiful, impressive, untouchable, and completely without warmth. Their footsteps echoed as he led her through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Everyone in the paintings looked angry, passing judgment on anyone who dared walk beneath their gaze. The master suite is at the end of the hall, Damien said, stopping before double doors. You'll find everything you need there. Savannah blinked. That's your room? It's our room now. That was part of the agreement. Heat flashed through her. There were many things in that agreement. None of them asked what I wanted. He finally turned to face her, expression still unreadable. Want is a luxury neither of us can afford. Then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway with her suitcase and the weight of her new reality. She pushed open the doors to the master suite and stepped inside. The room was enormous, dominated by a massive four-poster bed and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking vineyards. Decorated in shades of cream and gold, elegant and expensive, but what struck her most was how impersonal it felt. Like a hotel suite designed by someone who had never experienced comfort, only luxury. She set her suitcase down and walked to the window. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills covered in neat rows of grapevines, mountains in the distance, sky vast and blue. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like the most beautiful prison in the world. Behind her, the bedroom door opened. Damien stood in the doorway, jacket removed, but shirt still perfectly pressed. He looked like he belonged here among the expensive furniture and carefully curated art. She felt like an intruder. Dinner is at 7. The dining room is downstairs, first door on the left. And if I prefer to eat alone, then you'll be disappointed. She crossed her arms. I'm not going to pretend this is normal, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not going to smile and play the grateful wife. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to have dinner. With that, he left again. Savannah was alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that this man, her husband, was as much a prisoner of this arrangement as she was. The only difference was that he had chosen his cage. Dinner that evening was an exercise in controlled tension. The dining room was absurdly formal. Mahogany table that could seat 20. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across bone china and silver cutlery. Damien sat at the head of the table. Savannah to his right, close enough to speak, far enough to maintain the illusion of distance. The meal appeared as if by magic. Perfectly plated salmon, roasted vegetables arranged like art, wine that probably cost more than her family's monthly grocery budget. They ate in silence for 20 minutes. Damien cut his fish with surgical precision, his movements economical and controlled. Everything about him was controlled. His posture, his expressions, even the way he breathed seemed calculated. Do you always eat like you're performing surgery? She asked finally, unable to bear the silence. He looked up from his plate, gray eyes meeting hers. Do you always make conversation with strangers? You're not a stranger. You're my husband. Legal paperwork doesn't make us familiar. Then what does? He set down his fork carefully. Time, perhaps. Shared experiences. Things we don't have. And whose fault is that? Does it matter? His voice was tired suddenly, stripped of its earlier coldness. We're both here. We both signed the contract. Assigning blame won't change our situation. Savannah leaned back in her chair, studying him. In the candlelight, she could see faint shadows beneath his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that suggested sleepless nights. Why did you agree to this? She asked. You have money, power, everything. Why buy a wife? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he reached for his wine glass, swirling the dark liquid like it held secrets. Because some things can't be bought, only borrowed. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get tonight. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Breakfast is at 8. Mrs. Chen will show you around the estate tomorrow. Good night, Miss Blake. It's Mrs. Blackwood now, she said to his retreating back. Remember? Legal paperwork. He paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "Good night, Savannah." The way he said her name sent an unexpected shiver through her. Not cold, not warm, something in between that she couldn't quite identify. Then he was gone, and she was alone again. Over the next week, Savannah learned the rhythms of the Blackwood estate. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, showed her the grounds. 30 acres of vineyards, gardens that required 3 full-time gardeners, a library that could rival a small university. But no matter how beautiful the prison, it was still a prison. Damien remained distant. They ate meals together in silence, passed each other in hallways like ships in the night, shared a bedroom but never a bed. He slept on the leather couch by the window, refusing to discuss the arrangement. She should have been relieved. Instead, she found herself watching him, noticing small things, the way he rubbed his left shoulder when he thought no one was looking, the books on his nightstand, all philosophy and history, nothing light or escapist, the way he stared out at the vineyards at night, expression haunted. One evening, 2 weeks into her captivity, she found him in the library. He stood before a wall of photographs, shoulders rigid with tension. She approached quietly, curiosity overcoming her usual caution. The photographs showed a younger Damien. Same sharp features, but softer somehow, smiling. And beside him in every photo was a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. "Your mother?" Savannah asked softly. Damien's entire body went rigid. "You shouldn't be here. It's my house too now, remember? Legal paperwork. This room is private. Everything in this house is private. Including you." She moved closer, studying the photographs. She was beautiful. "She's dead." The words were brutal, final. But underneath, Savannah heard something else. Raw, unhealed grief. How long ago? 5 years, cancer. His jaw clenched. She fought it for 3 years. The best doctors, the best treatments. None of it mattered in the end. "I'm sorry. Your sympathy means nothing." But his voice cracked on the last word. Savannah made a decision then. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. He flinched like she'd burned him but didn't pull away. "Why did you really marry me, Damien?" He turned to look at her finally, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Pain. Deep, bone-crushing pain that had been carefully hidden behind walls of ice. "Because my mother made me promise," he said quietly. "Before she died, she made me promise I wouldn't be alone. That I would find someone, build a life. But I can't." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I don't know how to do this anymore. How to let anyone in. So I bought what I couldn't earn." "You bought a contract, not a person." "I know." He pulled away from her touch, rebuilding his walls brick by brick. "And that's exactly what you'll remain. A contract, nothing more." He walked out of the library, leaving Savannah standing alone among the photographs of a woman who had clearly loved her son more than anything. And for the first time since arriving at the Blackwood estate, Savannah felt something other than anger or resignation. She felt understanding. Everything changed the night of the charity gala. Damien had informed her 3 days prior that her attendance was required. Not requested, required. The Blackwood name meant something in California society, and appearances had to be maintained. Mrs. Chen helped her select a dress. Midnight blue silk that clung to her curves and fell to the floor in elegant waves. Simple diamond earrings that probably cost more than her parents' house. Hair swept up to expose the slender column of her neck. When she descended the stairs, Damien was waiting in the foyer. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a noir film, dangerous and untouchable. He looked up at her approach, and for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped. His eyes widened slightly, traveling over her with something that might have been appreciation or hunger. Then the mask was back in place. "You look acceptable," he said flatly. "You look like you're attending a funeral. Most of these events feel like death." He offered his arm stiffly. "Shall we?" The gala was held at the Caldwell Hotel, a historic building dripping with old money and older secrets. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, an orchestra playing Vivaldi. Men in tuxedos and women in couture mingled with practiced ease, their laughter bright and hollow. Damien's hand rested on the small of Savannah's back as they entered. The touch was light, impersonal, but it sent heat racing up her spine. She hated that her body responded to him, hated the way her heart raced when he stood too close, hated that somewhere in the past 3 weeks he'd become more than just her captor. Mr. Blackwood. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit approached, hand extended. "Good to see you. And this must be the new Mrs. Blackwood." "Richard Caldwell," Damien said, his voice taking on a polished social tone she'd never heard before. "May I introduce my wife, Savannah?" The word wife should have felt like chains. Instead, it sent a strange flutter through her chest. They circulated through the crowd. Damien introduced her to business associates, society matrons, politicians with shark smiles. Everyone wanted a piece of him, wanted his attention, his approval, his money. And through it all, he kept his hand on her back. A claim, a warning, a connection. "You're good at this," she murmured during a brief moment alone. "Playing the part." Years of practice. His eyes scanned the crowd with predatory awareness. "My mother used to say that society is just theater with better costumes." She sounds wise. She was. His jaw tightened. She also believed in fairy tales. Love. Happiness. All the pretty lies we tell ourselves. Maybe they're not lies. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Don't what? Don't look at me like that. Like I'm something other than what I am. And what are you?" Before he could answer, a woman's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. "Damien. Darling." Savannah turned to see a stunning blonde woman approaching. She wore a red dress that cost more than most cars, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. But it was her eyes that caught Savannah's attention. Cold, calculating, possessive. Damien's entire body went rigid beside her. Victoria. The name was a curse wrapped in silk. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your new acquisition?" "Savannah, this is Victoria Ashford. Victoria, my wife." "How charming." Victoria's gaze raked over Savannah with undisguised contempt. "Tell me, dear, how much did your family's debt cost? I'm always curious about these transactions." Heat flooded Savannah's face, but she held her ground. "I wasn't aware my marriage was public business." "Everything about the Blackwoods is public business." Victoria turned her attention back to Damien, her voice softening into something almost intimate. "We need to talk, privately. We have nothing to discuss, don't we?" She leaned closer, her perfume heavy and cloying. "What about the Aberdeen merger? What about the promises you made? Or have you forgotten everything in favor of your little charity case?" Damien's hand tightened on Savannah's back, his fingers pressing hard enough to bruise. "Be very careful what you say next." "Or what?" "You'll ruin me?" Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. "We both know you won't. You need me too much. The Aberdeen deal goes through me, Damien. Only me. And if you want it, you'll remember where your loyalties should lie." She swept away before either of them could respond, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken threats. "Who was that?" Savannah asked quietly. "No one important." She didn't seem like no one. Damien's expression had gone completely blank. "We're leaving. The gala isn't over. Now." His voice was hard, final. The drive home was suffocating with silence. Damien stared out the window, jaw clenched, hands fisted on his thighs. Whatever Victoria had stirred up, it was eating him alive. When they arrived at the estate, Savannah followed him inside, her heels clicking on marble. "Talk to me," she said. "There's nothing to say. That woman knew you, really knew you, and whatever history you have with her, it's not finished." He spun to face her, and the fury in his eyes made her step back. "You want to know about Victoria? Fine, she was my fiancée. Before the contract, before you, we were engaged for 2 years. And then my mother got sick, and Victoria showed me exactly who she was." "What happened?" "She left." His voice was hollow. "Said she didn't sign up for a life of hospital visits and funeral planning. Said she needed someone who could focus on the future, not the past. So she walked away 3 weeks before my mother died." Savannah's heart clenched. "I'm sorry. Don't be. She did me a favor. Showed me that love is just another transaction, another contract that can be broken when it's no longer convenient. Not all love is like that. All love is exactly like that. He moved closer, his eyes burning with something dangerous. Love is conditional. Love is temporary. Love is a lie we tell ourselves to make the loneliness bearable. You don't believe that? I do. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle scent of his cologne. And so should you. We have a contract, Savannah. Nothing more. Don't mistake proximity for intimacy. But even as he said it, his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Damien, she whispered. The sound of his name on her lips seemed to break something in him. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her skin. We can't, he said, but he didn't pull away. Why not? Because when this ends, and it will end, I need to know I didn't destroy you completely. He stepped back, severing the connection, and walked toward his office. Damien, wait. He paused but didn't turn around. The Aberdeen deal. What is it? A merger that will make Blackwood Industries the largest private equity firm on the West Coast. Worth billions, and Victoria controls it? Her father does. She's the heir apparent. Understanding dawned cold and heavy. You still need her. I need the deal. There's a difference, is there? He finally turned to look at her, and what she saw in his expression made her blood run cold. I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine, Savannah. Whatever it takes. The next morning, Savannah woke to an empty bedroom. No note, no explanation. Just the hollow feeling that something fundamental had shifted. She found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, arranging flowers with careful precision. Where's Damien? Mrs. Chen's hand stilled. He left early this morning. Business meeting. With who? The housekeeper's expression grew carefully neutral. I believe it was with Miss Ashford, ma'am. The world tilted sideways. Savannah spent the day in agony, watching the clock, imagining every terrible possibility. Damien with Victoria. Damien choosing the deal over everything else. Damien proving that he was exactly what he claimed to be. A man who valued contracts over connections. He returned at dusk, his tie loosened, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Savannah was waiting in the foyer. Where were you? Working. With Victoria? Yes. Doing what? He looked at her with hollow eyes. What I had to do. What does that mean? It means the Aberdeen deal is secure. It means Blackwood Industries will triple in value. It means everything I've worked for is finally within reach. And what did you have to give her in return? Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Damien. What did you give her? A promise. His voice was barely audible. That when our contract ends in 6 months, I won't renew it. That I'll be free to pursue other arrangements. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're going to divorce me. I'm going to honor the terms of our agreement. 1 year, that's what the contract states. And then what? You go back to Victoria? I do what's necessary for my company. Rage flooded through her, hot and cleansing. You bastard. You absolute bastard. Savannah, you knew what this was. You knew from the beginning that this was temporary. I knew it was a contract. Her voice broke. But I thought, these past weeks, I thought maybe... You thought wrong. She stepped closer, her hands clenched into fists. Look at me. Look at me and tell me you feel nothing. He met her gaze, his eyes empty. I feel nothing. But his hands were shaking. Liar, she whispered. Then she turned and walked up the stairs, each step taking her further from the man who had just broken something inside her. She hadn't even known was whole. 3 weeks passed in frozen silence. Damien buried himself in work, leaving before dawn and returning after midnight. When they did cross paths, he looked through her like she was a ghost, like she didn't exist at all. Savannah spent her days walking the vineyards, reading in the library, existing in the liminal space between wife and prisoner. At night, she lay in the massive bed alone, listening to him sleep on the couch, so close, but impossibly far away. She told herself she didn't care, told herself that his betrayal had killed whatever foolish feelings had been growing in her chest. But late at night, when the house was quiet and her defenses were low, she remembered the way he'd looked at her at the gala, the way his thumb had brushed across her cheekbone, the tremble in his hands when he'd lied and said he felt nothing. One evening, she found an envelope on the bed. Inside was a check, made out to her parents, for an amount that would clear their debt 3 times over. There was no note, no explanation. Just the check and the crushing weight of understanding he'd paid for her. Now he was paying for her silence, for her cooperation, for the 6 months of her life he still owned. She tore the check into pieces and left them on his pillow. The confrontation came at midnight. She heard him enter the bedroom, heard the pause as he discovered the shredded check. "What the hell is this?" His voice was rough, dangerous. She sat up in bed, the lamp casting harsh shadows across her face. "I'm not for sale anymore. The money was for your parents. My parents sold me once. I won't let you do it again." He stood in the doorway, still dressed in his suit, tie hanging loose. He looked exhausted, worn down to nothing. "I was trying to help. You were trying to ease your conscience." She climbed out of bed, wearing only a thin silk nightgown. "You made a deal with Victoria, fine, but don't pretend your blood money makes it better. What do you want from me?" The question came out like anguish. "What do you want, Savannah?" "The truth." She moved closer, close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Why did you really promise Victoria you'd end our marriage?" "I told you. The deal. Lie to everyone else. Don't lie to me." He stared at her for a long moment, something crumbling behind his eyes. Then he crossed to the window, his hands braced against the frame. "Because I'm afraid," he said quietly. "Because every day you're here, you dig deeper under my skin. Because I look at you, and I want things I promised myself I'd never want again. And that terrifies me more than any business deal, any loss, any failure." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "So you're ending this before it can really begin." "I'm ending this before I destroy you the way my father destroyed my mother." The words fell like stones into still water. "What?" He turned to face her, and the pain in his expression stole her breath. "My father was a good businessman, a terrible husband. He had affairs, multiple affairs. My mother knew, everyone knew, but she loved him anyway, and it killed her slowly from the inside out. Damien. When she got sick, he barely visited the hospital, too busy with his latest mistress. She died alone, Savannah, in a sterile room, hooked up to machines, because the man she loved couldn't be bothered to hold her hand." His voice cracked. I held her hand. I was there when she took her last breath. "And you know what her last words were?" Savannah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She said, "Don't be like him. Don't let the Blackwood curse take you too." He laughed bitterly. "But I am like him. I'm exactly like him. Cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice anything for power and control. I won't do that to you. I won't make you watch while I slowly become the man she warned me about. You're not him. You don't know that. Neither do I." She closed the distance between them, placing her hands on his chest. His heart thundered beneath her palms. "Then let me decide. Let me choose whether the risk is worth it." "I can't. Why not?" "Because if I let myself love you, and I lose you, I won't survive it." The confession was raw, stripped of all pretense. "I barely survived losing my mother. I won't survive losing you." "So instead you're choosing to lose me on your own terms?" "Yes." She stepped back, something hardening inside her. "Then you're more of a coward than your father ever was. At least he had the courage to feel something, even if he didn't know how to express it. You're so afraid of pain that you won't even try to live." The words hit their mark. She saw him flinch, saw fury and hurt flash across his face. "Get out. This is my room too. Get out." He was shaking now, his control shattering. "Get out before I say something we'll both regret." "Say it." She stood her ground. "Say whatever you're thinking. Be honest for once in your life. I love you." The words exploded out of him like violence. "I love you, and it's destroying me. Every time I look at you, every time you speak, every time you exist in my space, I fall deeper. And I can't, I won't." "Why not?" "Because love doesn't last. Because people leave. Because everyone I've ever loved has either died or abandoned me, and I can't be that vulnerable again. I'm right here. Her voice was steady despite the tears. I'm not leaving. I'm not dying. I'm standing in front of you, telling you that I feel the same way. But you're so obsessed with protecting yourself that you can't see what's right in front of you. Savannah, I love you, you idiot. I love you despite the contract, despite the circumstances, despite every reason I shouldn't. And I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to try. For a moment, she thought she'd reached him. His expression softened. His hand lifted toward her face. Then his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and everything in him shut down. I have to take this. Damien, don't. It's business. He was already moving toward the door. We'll talk later. We're talking now. But he was gone. The door closing behind him with terrible finality. Savannah stood alone in the bedroom, surrounded by luxury that felt like ash, and made a decision. She couldn't stay here anymore. Not like this. Not in this beautiful prison where love was treated like a disease to be cured, rather than a gift to be cherished. She began packing. Not everything. Just enough to survive. Some clothes, her grandmother's locket, the poetry book. She moved with mechanical precision, building walls of her own. She was nearly finished when she heard the crash downstairs. Then Damien's voice, raised in anger. Then another voice, male, rough, threatening. Her blood turned to ice. She ran to the door, cracking it open just enough to hear the conversation in the foyer below. You missed a payment. Blackwood. The stranger's voice was cold, professional. Mr. Castellano doesn't appreciate that. I'm 2 days late. Tell Castellano I'll have his money by Friday. That's not how this works. You know the terms. You borrowed from us when the banks wouldn't touch you. Now you pay, or we collect another way. I said I'll have the money. Or maybe we collect from your pretty new wife instead. The temperature in the room. Drop 10 degrees. Touch her and I'll bury you. Damien's voice was lethal. I'll destroy everything you've built. I'll make sure Castellano himself comes after you for endangering his operation. Big talk for a man who can't make his payments. The Aberdeen deal closes next week. I'll have triple what I owe you, but if you threaten her again, the deal's off, and you'll never see a cent. Silence. Then footsteps. The front door opening and closing. Savannah stood frozen, her mind racing. Damien owed money to criminals, dangerous criminals, the kind of men who didn't make empty threats, and he'd been protecting her. All this time, all his distance, all his coldness, it had been to protect her. The Aberdeen deal wasn't about greed or power. It was about survival, and she'd just told him she was leaving. She made a decision in that moment, one that would cost her everything. She had to save him. Even if it destroyed her, even if he never knew, even if he hated her for it, because that's what love was. Not the pretty fairy tale his mother believed in, but the hard, brutal choice to sacrifice yourself for someone who might not even want the sacrifice. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn she'd never call. Victoria, it's Savannah Blackwood. We need to talk. Victoria arrived within the hour, her red sports car crunching gravel like bones. Savannah met her at the gates, away from the house, away from Damien. This is unexpected. Victoria's smile was sharp as glass, the little wife calling for help. I need you to expedite the Aberdeen deal. Victoria's eyebrows rose. I don't take orders from you. I'm not ordering. I'm negotiating. You have nothing I want, don't I? Savannah met her gaze steadily. You want Damien. You've always wanted him. And right now I'm the only thing standing between you and getting him back. Interest flickered in Victoria's eyes. I'm listening. Close the Aberdeen deal this week. Get Damien his money. Make sure he's free of whatever debt he's carrying. And in return, I'll leave, quietly. No lawyers, no scandal. I'll sign whatever papers you want saying the marriage is over. You can have him. Victoria studied her like a scientist examining a specimen. You love him. It wasn't a question. That's why I'm doing this. How noble. Victoria's voice dripped with mockery. The sacrificial lamb. Does he know? He can never know. If he finds out, he'll refuse the help. His pride won't allow it. And you think I'll keep your little secret? I think you want him enough to do whatever it takes, even if it means keeping quiet about how you won." Victoria was silent for a long moment, calculating, weighing her options. Then she smiled. A real smile, not the practice society version. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Fine, I'll close the deal by Thursday. But the moment that money hits his account, you disappear. No goodbyes, no dramatic exit. You vanish like you were never here." Agreed. They shook hands. A deal between two women who loved the same broken man in completely different ways. As Victoria drove away, Savannah felt something inside her crack apart. She'd just sold her future for his safety, and he would never know, would never understand why she left. He would think she'd abandoned him, just like everyone else, but he would be alive. He would be safe, and sometimes that had to be enough. The next 3 days passed like a dream. Or a nightmare. Savannah moved through the house like a ghost, memorizing every detail. The way sunlight hit the vineyards in the morning, the smell of jasmine from the gardens, the sound of Damien's footsteps on marble. She and Damien barely spoke. The chasm between them had grown too wide to bridge. He spent his nights in the office, drinking whiskey and staring at spreadsheets. She spent hers packing and unpacking the same suitcase, trying to build the courage to leave. On Thursday morning, she woke to find Damien standing at the window, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I see it." "The full amount plus interest." He paused. "When did it clear?" "This morning." Another pause. "And the Aberdeen deal?" "It's done? Complete?" Savannah's heart stopped. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at it like it held the secrets of the universe. "It's over," he said quietly. "The debt, the danger, all of it. I'm free." "That's good." He turned to look at her, and she saw confusion in his eyes. Victoria closed the deal 3 days early, expedited everything. She's never done that before. Never been that cooperative. Savannah forced herself to breathe normally. Maybe she finally realized you were worth the effort. Maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. He moved closer, and she could see exhaustion etched in every line of his face. He looked like a man who'd been fighting for so long he'd forgotten what peace felt like. "Savannah, about what I said the other night. It doesn't matter." "It does. I was angry and scared, and I said things I shouldn't have." "You said you loved me." Her voice was steady despite the breaking inside. "Were you lying?" "No." The word was barely a whisper. "That was the only true thing I said." "Then why are we still doing this? Why are we still pretending?" He reached for her, his hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "Because I don't know how to do anything else. Because I'm terrified of becoming my father. Because loving you feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to jump." "Then don't jump alone." She covered his hand with hers. We jumped together, or not at all. For one perfect moment, she thought he would say yes, thought he would pull her close and choose her over his fear. Then his phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's Victoria. I need to take this." "Of course you do." He stepped away, answering. "Victoria, thank you for expediting the deal. I appreciate it." Savannah couldn't hear Victoria's response, but she saw Damien's expression change. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like betrayal. "What do you mean you had help?" His eyes cut to Savannah. "Who helped you?" She felt the world tilt sideways. Victoria had told him. The one thing she'd promised not to do, and she'd done it anyway. "I see." Damien's voice was cold. "Thank you for the information." He ended the call and stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "You called Victoria. It wasn't a question." "Yes." "You made a deal with her." "Yes." "What did you promise her?" Savannah lifted her chin. "What I had to, Savannah." "What did you promise her?" "That I would leave. That I would sign the divorce papers. That she could have you." The silence that followed was deafening. "You sacrificed yourself." His voice was hollow. "You gave up everything to save me. You were in danger. You needed the money. I did what had to be done, without asking me, without telling me. You never would have accepted it." "You're right. I wouldn't have." He moved toward her, his eyes burning. "Because your safety, your happiness, Your life matters more to me than any debt, any deal, any amount of money. Do you understand that? You matter more. I was trying to help. You were trying to martyr yourself." His voice rose, raw with emotion. "You were trying to make the same sacrifice my mother made, giving up everything for a man who didn't know how to accept it, who didn't know how to be worthy of it. That's not what this was. Then what was it?" "Love!" The word burst from her like a confession. "It was love, Damien. The real, ugly, complicated kind that makes you do stupid things. The kind that makes you sacrifice yourself even when you know it won't be appreciated. The kind your mother felt for your father, even though he didn't deserve it." He stared at her, his chest heaving. Then, without warning, he pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers. The kiss was desperate, fierce, tasting of salt and whiskey, and 3 months of denial. His hands tangled in her hair, holding her like she might disappear. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and love and longing into that single point of connection. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, he rested his forehead against hers. "Don't leave," he whispered. "Please don't leave. Victoria expects me to. I don't care what Victoria expects. I care what you want." "What do you want, Savannah?" She looked up at him. This beautiful, broken man who had been so afraid of love that he'd almost let it slip through his fingers. "I want you to be brave. I want you to choose this. Choose us. Not because of a contract or an obligation or fear of being alone, but because you actually want to. I do want to." His voice was fierce. "I want to so badly it terrifies me. But you were right. I've been a coward. I've been so obsessed with protecting myself that I didn't see what I was destroying. And now I'm done being afraid." He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. "I love you, Savannah Blake Blackwood. I love your strength and your fire and the way you refuse to be broken even when the world tries. I love that you saw past my walls to the man underneath. And I'm asking you, no contract, no obligation, no pressure to stay. Not as my wife on paper, but as my partner, my equal. My choice." Tears streamed down her face. "What about Victoria?" "Victoria can wait." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Actually, Victoria can go to hell. I'll handle the fallout. I'll deal with the consequences. But I'm not losing you. Not to her. Not to fear. Not to anything." "Your mother would have liked me," Savannah said softly. "She would have loved you, almost as much as I do." He kissed her again, softer this time. A promise instead of a plea. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the vineyards. The Blackwood estate, which had felt like a prison for so long, suddenly felt like something else. Like home. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rewrite the contract." He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "New terms. No end date. No escape clauses. Just 2 people choosing each other every single day." "That sounds terrifying." "It is. But I think the best things usually are." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "What happened to the man who said love was just another transaction?" "He met a woman who proved him wrong." Damien pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Besides, if love is a transaction, you're the only person I want to do business with. That's possibly the least romantic thing you've ever said. Give me time. I'm new at this." She looked up at him. This man who had bought her freedom with a contract and then set her free with love, who had been so afraid of becoming his father that he'd almost become worse, who had learned finally that the bravest thing wasn't protecting yourself from pain, but opening yourself up to it anyway. "We should call my parents," she said. "Tell them the debt is paid. Tell them I'm staying. Are you? Staying?" She reached up and pulled him down for another kiss. "Every single day, for as long as you'll have me. Then you're stuck here forever. I can live with that." They stood in the sunlight, 2 broken people who had found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new, something better, something that looked a lot like hope. Outside, the vineyard stretched toward the horizon. Inside, the Blackwood estate was finally, truly, a home. And in the end, that was the only contract that mattered. The one written not on paper, but in the space between heartbeats. In the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. In the decision to love even when love meant risking everything. Victoria called 3 times that day. Damien didn't answer. Instead, he and Savannah walked through the vineyards hand in hand, talking about nothing and everything, making plans, building a future. And when the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Damien pulled Savannah close and whispered against her hair, "Thank you." For what? For being brave when I couldn't be. For seeing something in me worth saving. For staying. She turned in his arms and smiled up at him. "Thank you for finally letting me." They kissed as the stars began to appear, the Blackwood estate standing strong and steadfast behind them. A fortress no longer. A home at last. And somewhere in the library, in a photograph of a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, Damien's mother smiled. Her son had kept his promise after all. He had found someone, built a life, broken the Blackwood curse, not with money or power or control, but with the simple, terrifying, beautiful act of choosing to love. The end.